Welcome back to Disneyland Hotel Diaries. Picking a hotel near the parks is a huge deal. Today, we're diving deep into the Anaheim Majestic Garden Hotel. From the outside, it looks like a total fairy tale castle. But wow, based on hundreds of guest reviews, the story inside is, well, it's a lot more complicated. Okay, so let's start with the hard numbers. Across more than 2,300 reviews, this place lands a 3.6 out of 5. Now, that's not exactly a failing grade, but it's definitely not a glowing report card either. It basically screams that people have had some very, very different experiences here. So let's figure out why. So this is their big promise, right? The whole idea is you're staying in this majestic castle, super close to Disneyland. It's even an official Disneyland Good Neighbor hotel. But the real question, the one that comes up over and over in the reviews, is does the reality inside the hotel match that fantasy on the outside? All right, so first, let's talk about that promise. What's the official story the hotel is selling? What makes it look so appealing when you first pull up? And you gotta admit, on paper, it sounds fantastic. They talk about this huge 13-acre property with beautiful gardens, a Disney desk right there in the lobby for your tickets, and almost 500 extra-large rooms. I mean, these are all the things that promise a perfect, easy Disney vacation. It's exactly what you'd be looking for. But check this out. When you start to break down that average score, something really interesting pops out. The location gets a super high 4.2, but then service and cleanliness, they're lagging way behind at 3.8. This right here tells you the hotel's greatest strength and, well, its biggest potential problems. And that high location score really brings us to the single biggest advantage of this hotel. It's the one thing that reviewers praise again and again, even in the most scathing negative reviews. And it's all about getting to and from the park. And here it is, the hero of the story, the Dream Machine shuttle. The key word here is free. It runs every half hour, and it saves you from that absolute nightmare of parking at the Disneyland Resort, which is expensive and exhausting. For a lot of families, this shuttle is a total game changer. And this quote right here just shows you how incredibly valuable that shuttle can be. This guest points out that even after a late-night event that ended at 1 in the morning, the shuttle was still running. Can you imagine the relief, not having to worry about being stranded after a 16-hour day at the park? That is a massive, massive perk. But that amazing shuttle eventually has to bring you back to the hotel. So let's step inside those castle walls because this is where that majestic promise starts to have a major clash with reality for a whole lot of guests. And this is where the fairy tale just completely shatters. This guest experience is pretty jarring, right? But it is not a one-off complaint. Dozens and dozens of reviews say the same thing, describing these awful smells that just completely destroy that majestic vibe the second you walk in. Look, this isn't about one person having a bad day. We're talking about a clear pattern of problems that show up in review after review. People are talking about visible mold, wallpaper peeling off the walls, rust, disgusting air vents, even dead bugs on the ceiling. And then you add in all the reports about the beds being as comfortable as sleeping on a brick, and a really troubling picture starts to come together. And then there's this. This is probably the most serious accusation we found. And it's every traveler's worst nightmare. A guest claims their group was actually attacked by bedbugs. And what's maybe even more disturbing is they say the hotel's reaction was, well, not what you'd hope for with a health and safety issue that serious. Okay, we're about to get into the final verdict and whether this place is worth the risk. But first, if you're finding this breakdown helpful, please just take a second to hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps us make more deep dives just like this one. So this all brings us to the big trade-off, right? On one hand, you have this incredible transportation perk, but on the other hand, you have some really serious issues with the rooms themselves. Let's put them side by side. And this is why this hotel is so controversial. The perks, like that free shuttle and the big rooms, they're real and they're significant. But the quirks? These aren't just little annoyances. We're talking about huge cleanliness problems, broken stuff in the rooms, and even allegations of theft. So this isn't just a simple trade-off, it's a high-risk gamble. And on top of all the other service issues, there's this really weird policy that blindsided a ton of guests. People were shocked to find out when they checked in that housekeeping doesn't really clean your room every day. They only do what they call a visit every third night. So if you want fresh towels or your trash taken out, you have to call and ask for it.
This quote just perfectly captures the frustration people felt trying to get any problem solved. This person tried for 6 days to talk to a manager named Frank about being overcharged, but Frank was never there. It actually became a running joke for them that Frank clearly does not exist, which, yikes, it says a lot about the hotel's accountability.
So, what's the final verdict here? Based on all the guest feedback, the most important takeaways aren't really tips. They're more like warnings. Seriously, this advice comes straight from people who've stayed there. One person says, bring your own Lysol wipes to clean the room yourself. Another one urges you to check the mattresses the second you get in the room, probably for bed bugs. And finally, a warning to check every single drawer and corner for your stuff before you leave because of those theft claims. This quote just kind of sums up that feeling of deep disappointment, doesn't it? For this guest, the experience was so far from majestic that they thought the hotel needed a completely different name. And then you get reviews that are just this. Straight to the point, no trying to balance the pros and cons, just a very clear, direct warning to anyone thinking about booking.
So let's break it all down. Who should even think about staying here? This hotel might be for you if that free shuttle is your absolute #1 priority above everything else, and you're willing to take a huge gamble on your room. But you should absolutely avoid it if you care about basic cleanliness, if you want a room where things aren't broken, or if you expect anyone to help you if a problem comes up.
So in the end, it all just boils down to this one simple question. Is the amazing convenience of a free shuttle that runs all the time worth the very real risk of winding up in a dirty, broken, or maybe even an infested room? That's the gamble. And only you can decide if it's one you're willing to take.